afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Gregorian, President and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club, and I want to welcome you to today's exciting meeting. I especially want to welcome DEC members, and if you're not a DEC member yet, please give me 10 seconds to myth bust. There's no nomination or application process for becoming a DEC member. There's no job level requirement or salary requirement. We're simply looking for people that want to build their networks with other DEC members and learn from thought leaders on stage. So we invite you to join us, and you can do that at econclub.org. As we get started today, I would just ask you to silence your cell phone so we do not disturb the program. And if you've been with us before, you know we always begin with a pledge and a prayer. So I invite you to stand now and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance as we honor our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And kindly remain standing as our invocation today will be delivered by Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Drutchess from St. Paul United Church of Christ, and it is so nice to see you again.
Good to be here. Let's bow our heads in a moment of reverence and prayer. Oh, gracious God, at a time when our nation is beset by challenges from all sides, from pandemic, from climate volatility, from domestic strife, give us the cool heads we need in our present crunch. Help us to value reason over suspicion, emotion, and opportunistic ambition. Restore to us a sense of civic virtue upon which any healthy republic depends. Above all, renew in each of us a commitment to the common good with a concern always for the well-being of the least in our midst, and for those younger and future generations who will inhabit the world and those unresolved troubles we leave behind. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Drutchess, and you may all please be seated. I want to take a moment and welcome former DEC CEO Beth Chappell. It's always a treat to have you in attendance, Beth. Thank you. And it's also always a treat to have high school and college students with us. As you know, they're here courtesy of our generous corporate sponsors. They got to spend some special time with Jerry this morning earlier before lunch, so we thank Jerry for that. I want to let you know who's here with us. We've got students from Loyola High School and Brother Rice High School, compliments of Jerry Norcia and the DTE folks. Thank you. Sterling Heights High School, thanks to Adam Robbins and Accenture. And the Mighty Maples from Seaholm, my alum. Thanks to Angie, Bill from EY. Let's give a round of applause to our sponsors and welcome the students. A couple things on your table, our upcoming programs. You're going to see a mix of in-person and virtual. We really hope you can be with us. I know it's a tough day. Monday, November 29th. We're hosting the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo. It's an honor for us to host a cabinet member, and we want to welcome her with a really nice crowd. So we're looking forward to seeing you there if you can make it. And okay, all you Spartans, we've got your president, Stanley, the following Monday, December 6th, so we want to see you there. And to start off the new year, it's our always popular 2022 Michigan Economic Outlook meeting on January 13th. You'll meet the new MEDC CEO, Quentin Messer, and GM's chief economist, Elaine Buckberg. So make your reservations to see us at all of those. Also on your table, check out our sponsor brochure. We would not be here if it wasn't for the generosity of those folks. We thank you if you're a sponsor of the DEC, and thanks so much for being with us. We encourage you to tweet if you're a tweeter using @Debt Economic Club. And I love this part, the DEC's incredible history of speakers that tell the history of our country. And Jerry, November 18th is a very popular date in our 87-year history, and you, sir, now join a distinguished list of 14 other speakers who graced the podium on this specific day. A few highlights, however. You want to talk about history. I hadn't heard of this guy, but I looked it up yesterday. Alexander Kerensky, a key political figure in the Russian Revolution in 1917, addressed the DEC in 1940 on this day, and his speech was titled, "Who Will Win, Stalin or Hitler?" Very fascinating. 1946, Charles Wilson, the chairman of General Motors, who went on to become the Secretary of Defense under President Eisenhower, was at the DEC. And more recently, in 2010, a name you might recognize, a congressman at that time from Indiana named Mike Pence was on our stage. And today we're pleased to add you, Jerry, as our 15th speaker on this day in DEC history. So congratulations, and thanks for being with us. And one of the more popular elements certainly is we want to hear from you in the final 15 minutes. There's instructions on your table on how to submit a question you might have for Jerry. And those questions will make their way to our presiding officer, who I'm about to put to work. Angie Kelly is the office managing partner for EY. She's a board member and a great friend of the DEC and to me personally, and also a great supporter of many, many things in our community and state. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Angie Kelly.
Thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, DEC members and guests. It's my privilege to introduce today's participants. Let me begin by starting with our guest speaker, Jerry Norcia. Jerry is the president and chief executive officer of DTE Energy. He joined the company in 2002, where he's had a number of executive roles, including COO, as well as presidents of DTE Gas and DTE Electric. Jerry has more than 30 years of experience in the energy industry, where he's worked in executive leadership roles, business development, engineering, and operations. He serves on many national and local boards and is currently serving as co-chair of the 2021 United Way campaign here in southeastern Michigan, and we thank you for your leadership in that role, Jerry. Jerry holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Windsor, and thank you for being here today, Jerry. Our moderator today is Sandy Pierce, and is certainly a familiar face to many of you. Sandy is a fixture in the banking industry in Michigan and in the Midwest, and is chair of Huntington, Michigan, and regional banking executive. She's extremely active on many boards, including the Detroit Economic Club, and is so generous with her time and talents. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm Detroit Economic welcome to Jerry and Sandy. And I'll turn it over to you, Sandy.
Thank you, Angie. Okay, fireside chat with Jerry Norcia. For those of you that don't know Jerry, I think this will be not only an interesting half hour and an insightful half hour, but you'll get to know Jerry a bit as well. Before we get to Southeast Michigan's electric infrastructure, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your family, your kids, your grandkids, if you have any?
Sure. Well, thanks, Sandy, and thank you for the opportunity, everybody, and thank you for being here. My background. So I'm the son of Italian immigrants. My parents immigrated from Italy to Canada, to Toronto specifically, back in the 1950s. My dad was a bricklayer, and my mom was a janitor in a hospital. And really, really hard workers. When I was about 5 years old, we moved back to Italy, and I got to live with my grandparents on their farm for 3 years. And it was a pretty cool experience as a young boy. I went to a one-room schoolhouse with 5 grades in it and 1 teacher. And the cool part, about 2 years ago, the last time I was in Italy, I went and found my teacher. And that was pretty neat. He looked really tall when I was in school, and then I'm up here, he's probably 5'4" or 5'5". I thought he was this giant of a man, but then we moved back from Italy. We moved to Windsor, and I grew up, really, Windsor is essentially a suburb of Detroit, in essence, from a media perspective and the amount of back and forth between families. It's a pretty cool community, connected heavily to Detroit and the automotive industry. Went to the University of Windsor, chemical engineer, wrote my last exam on a Friday, and went to work for the gas company on Monday. And it was a similar gas company to DTE Gas, really a mirror image. And then obviously got married in Windsor to a wonderful woman, Josie. I had 3 kids in Canada, and we moved to the U.S. in 2006. when I became president of the gas company. And we live in Northville, and now I've got 2 grandsons, Angelo and Johnny, and they're a lot of fun. I mean, they were both born during the pandemic. Matter of fact, my grandson Angelo, and I'll tell this quickly, we were in a board meeting at DTE, and my grandson was born during that board meeting, and that was the last day we had before June that we had a live board meeting at DTE, you know, like all of us together. So we shut down the office that day. We shut down headquarters. So the next day, the headline in Detroit Free Press was canceled, and I clipped it out. Actually, Paula Silver, who runs our communications group, got me the clipping, and I framed it because I want to give it to him and say, the only thing I wasn't canceled that day was you. So,
That is great.
yeah.
And Josie is a great grandma because she babysits for
Oh
those
my
2
God,
little
yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're going to go from family structure to infrastructure.
I like that.
And in your case, let's talk about the electric infrastructure. From my perspective, seriously, at Huntington Bank, I can see why general infrastructure is really getting a lot of discussion. We just saw the infrastructure bill being passed last week, and it's really important fundamentally to our country and to a healthy economy. So we're interested in your thoughts on how DTE's electric infrastructure ties into the economy right here in Southeast Michigan where we all live.
Well, I would say that if you look at many parts of the world, if you want to create distinction, where electric infrastructure is not in great shape, it's really hard to maintain prosperity in a community, and also to bring new businesses and attract more prosperity and development into, you know, a city, a region, or a country if you don't have what I would call real high-quality electric infrastructure, along with all other infrastructure needs that a prosperous country needs. So we view the grid as fundamental to our current state, but also fundamental to our future.
It really is. Appreciate that perspective. You mentioned that DTE filed a distributed grid plan with the Michigan Public Service Commission. I have no idea what that is. Can you explain exactly what is a distributed grid plan and what it means for us?
Well, the distribution grid plan is really a detailed plan that looks at 5 years out, 10 years out, and 15 years out, and it tries to anticipate our electric needs and any infrastructure that we need in order to support those needs. So it's a very detailed plan. It's like 600 pages long, and there's probably only 100 people at DTE that have actually read every word. I read the summaries, of course, to make sure I knew what I was getting myself into, but very detailed plan. It talks about, you know, the rebuild of fundamental infrastructure like substations, wires, poles, automation on the grid so that we can more efficiently restore power in the event of outages and prevent outages. So it really goes after resiliency, reliability, and also affordability. And then we run a bunch of scenarios in there. We look at worsening weather patterns, which we've continued to see, and then we also look at demand scenarios where we're seeing, you know, a tremendous movement towards electrification. But while I have this minute, just 10 seconds, I want the people from DTE that actually are going to make the distribution grid plan happen to stand up here and just I'd like to recognize them just very quickly. They're all here and they're so I get to talk about it, but they actually do the work. So that's why I wanted to recognize them.
That's really great. And any of you in the audience that would like to know more about the distributed plan, you just met everyone that can talk about it. So thank you for your work. That's great. Okay, when talking about the plan, in addition to talking about what you're doing today to upgrade our electric infrastructure in Southeast Michigan, you did mention the grid of the future. Unpack the idea of a grid of the future and what future are you anticipating that we all need to prepare for?
So that's a really great question, and I want you to imagine a future where half of our energy comes from the wind and the sun, and also other clean energy sources like natural gas. And that's a big part, fundamentally, of our future. The other part of our future is imagine a grid that can deliver power to your home, your business, and also be able to take power and flow it in both directions. And also a grid that can be resilient, reliable, under any weather circumstances. So that's really what the plan is about. On the first score, which is to build sources of clean energy, over the next 5 years, we're going to invest $3 billion in cleaner sources of energy. And much of it is due to subscription services. It's called My Green Power, where we've got large corporations and residential customers signing up to green up their power. And we build solar panels and wind turbines to support those subscriptions. And then another $8 billion will be invested in the grid to modernize the grid, automate the grid, and again, make it resilient to all kinds of weather patterns that we foresee getting worse in the future. We've seen weather patterns worsen for at least a decade, and we've been preparing for that, but we continue to need to invest. So that's a total of $11 billion of investment in the grid and in cleaner sources of energy, and that's all here in Michigan. So not only will it prepare this state for its future from an energy perspective, but it'll also create thousands and thousands of jobs and economic development on its own.
Jerry, you mentioned My Green in an earlier session. Talk a little bit about what that is, because I think a lot of people don't realize what it is and they can participate in it.
So this is something that residential customers can participate in, or also we have structured products for large corporate clients like General Motors that have signed up for it, Ford Motor Company, as well as Trinity Hospital Systems, and the list goes on, Detroit Diesel, but we're getting about 500 residential customers signing up each week. And essentially what it is that for a slight increase, we are able to provide you with a green product. And what we do, it allows you to green up your power portfolio. So in other words, you go 100% renewables if you want, or you can go 15% renewable or 20% renewable. We give you a sliding scale, and it's something that is just flying off the shelf, and our customers really love, both corporate clients and residential clients.
And so for residential, how much would that be?
So if you compare it to residential, if you look at the cost, it's about a third of the cost of putting a solar panel on your roof, and you get the same result. You get green power. And it's hard to green up 100% of your power with a solar panel on your roof. And I think it's great that people are doing solar panels on their roofs, but our alternative is to go build large-scale utility solar fields and solar farms, and that just brings the cost way down. So it's about a third of the cost.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Okay, how important is the electric grid to the rest of our infrastructure? So, roads, water, cable, telecommunications.
If you look at a microcosm like Detroit, where it's undergoing a major renaissance and renewal in terms of economic development activity, new buildings being renovated, new auto plants being built in the city and in the region. The grid is just fundamental in making sure that that is easy to do and economic to do. So not only is it important that it's reliable and resilient, it can also accept new demand, but it also has to be competitive and affordable. And in relation to other infrastructure, you really do need to have great roads, great bridges, great water systems, and great energy infrastructure in order to make the economy work the way it does here in America. I believe that's what really, it underpins our economic development and prosperity.
So will DTE benefit financially from the infrastructure bill that was just passed?
Our customers definitely will, because what will happen is there's two elements in that bill. One is a tax matter that helps lower the upfront cost of renewable energy, and the other one are production tax credits that incentivize companies like ours to go and invest in renewables at a much faster pace. And we pass all of those tax benefits onto our customers in the form of lower rates for the same product. So it is very beneficial to our customers, and it's beneficial to us because we get to invest in those products.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, talk about a modern smart grid. What does that mean for business in Southeast Michigan? And talk about the competitive advantage of a smart grid.
So think about a grid where it's highly automated and highly reliable and also competitive and affordable. So I would picture that. Now, how do you contrast what we have today to what a grid in a very micro way is different, will be different. So today, I'll give you an example. At some of our older substations and circuits, if we have a power outage in a neighborhood or in a business community because of trees, let's say a tree falls on a wire, we have to actually send someone to look for where the damage is, okay? That may take several hours, and at night, it's also a dangerous thing for our people to be walking through backyards and looking for down wires and trying to understand exactly where is this outage. What we're doing is so smart grid is things like putting sensing devices to know where the outage actually happened, and then sending that back to a control center in Detroit that we just built this in the last few years, a very modern control center where looks like NASA in there where we're controlling the grid. That's a very cool place if you want to see it. So those sensing devices send that information back, and then we're actually able to control, isolate that device between fuses. So it's like shutting off the fuse so you got it isolated, and then we can start flipping switches to turn other circuits on to feed that circuit automatically. So the outage gets restored for 95% of the people that are impacted in seconds versus hours. So that's what's fundamentally different and will be different. And also, as we advance our tree trimming program to a new standard, we're about 5 years through a 7-year period, we will have less tree interference. And then with newer equipment, even if there is tree interference, it'll be able to withstand it better because it'll be stronger and more modern and more agile.
Describe the impact of tree interference on reliability.
Well, this summer was a horrible summer for our customers. We had 11 storms back to back and 5 tornadoes touch down. In one community, we had 2 tornadoes touch down in the same summer within weeks. And we were not only faced with fixing the power infrastructure, but also providing significant humanitarian aid to that community. So I went out with the crews on the biggest storm we had this summer, which was August 11th through the 15th. And all I saw was trees tangled up in our wires. And in the communities that got hit the hardest were communities where we were only maybe halfway through the new enhanced tree trim cycle. So what we've done, I think you've seen it, is we've invested another $70 million over the next year and a half to really accelerate our tree trimming in those hardest hit communities, because we don't want to repeat for those communities. And then we're also looking at other vulnerable communities for next summer to see if we have a repeat of these incredible storms, which we've never seen before, we can't have the same experience for our customers.
Okay, let's switch if we can to global warming and carbon reduction, because we're all reading and hearing about it in public and government, business leaders. DTE has carbon reduction plans to change its electric generation sources to more clean and renewable energy. But does this new electric grid play a role in helping us reach our carbon reduction goals?
The simple answer is yes. We've got a goal of reducing carbon by 80% by 2040. And the way we do that is by retiring our coal plants. We built a lot of coal plants between the 1950s through the early 80s. When the oil crisis descended upon us, there was a big movement in the electric industry to build coal plants because we had huge sources of coal in this country. So that was a great idea at the time, but it's a very carbon intensive product. So we're slowly retiring those coal plants and replacing them with renewable resources like wind and solar, and also natural gas. So just to give you a feel for it, if you converted all of our coal plants to natural gas and wind and solar, you get about an 80% reduction in carbon just from that. And then we want to be net zero by 2050, but that's going to require new technologies like hydrogen and battery storage at very large scale. We are looking at ways to pull those dates forward right now. We've been talking to our board and our investors about pulling those retirement dates forward, and you'll likely see us retire most of our coal sometime in the mid-30s. So it's going to start to move forward. This year and next year, we're retiring about 20% of our coal plants, and it's been replaced by, $3 billion of renewable resources. And we just fired up a brand new natural gas plant up in St. Clair County just 2 weeks ago. So that was a $1 billion investment for us. So lots of transformation and lots of opportunity to really provide clean sources of energy.
So turn from DTE to us as individual consumers and the businesses that we all participate in or run. How do we get involved in carbon neutrality? What kind of programs?
Sure, so 2 things. Obviously, if we don't have to produce the energy in the first place, if you adopt some of our energy efficiency practices, that is probably the lowest cost option and the best way to reduce carbon emissions and improve the environment. 2 is we also have the My Green Power program, which is a way to sign up and really decarbonize your footprint. So that's for power. And then we're one of the first utilities in the country to offer a gas product where we will buy carbon offsets on your behalf. So for $4 a month, you can reduce your carbon footprint from natural gas by 25%. For $16 a month for the average customer, you can reduce your carbon footprint by 100%. And the way we do that is we go buy this product's got a fancy name for it. It's called biosequestration products, which are
Write that down.
which is a fancy way of saying you buy carbon offsets from forestry companies because they change their forestry practices. They keep their trees up longer, or they change the way they harvest their trees. And there's agencies that certify those as carbon offsets because you're absorbing carbon from the environment. So pretty cool stuff. We're one of the first to do that. So our gas company is offering that now.
Really interesting. You mentioned this a few times today already, but the severe storms this summer. On the subject of global warming and its impact, has DTE seen a change in weather patterns? And if so, what can your company do to combat that and keep the power on? Because as you mentioned, so many lost power for so many days, unprecedented.
Yes, unprecedented. So we've been watching weather patterns worsen for over a decade. And well, 5 or 6 years ago, we saw that the weather patterns were really attacking our system in a fundamentally different way. And the way we measure it is number of days where the wind blows at velocities higher than 40 miles an hour. And that's just on a steep incline, okay, over the last decade. And so what used to, we'd have summers with very few outages, but it's been worsening. So what have we done? So in 2014-15, we started to really triple our tree trim budget and also get more aggressive. You know, there was a time where we left a lot of trees in and around the wires after we trimmed. Now we're pushing the trees back off our wires because the wind was pushing the trees and touching the wire. And all it has to do is touch the wire, and it pops the fuse on a circuit. And then you're out for several hours. So that's one thing that we're
But don't trim them yourselves.
Don't trim them themselves, no, we don't want that. So that's really one fundamental way, because 90% of our outages this summer was caused by tree interference. And so the weather patterns are getting worse. Now, this year was a outlier set of events, but we can't take that chance, right? So that's why we've gotten even more aggressive with tree trimming than we've ever been. We increased our workforce by 30% in that arena. So that's job number one. And then, like I said, make your poles and wires more resilient to wind events after you've taken the trees off the wires. But how else can we impact climate change? I think our decarbonization agenda. If we all do that as an electric industry, which we are in this country, we're way ahead of, President Obama had set some pretty aggressive targets for the electric industry. And I'm happy to say that the electric industry has shattered those targets already. So we're way ahead of where he wanted us to be. And so we're well on our way as a country to really decarbonizing the economy, especially as it relates to power production. And then I think the movement that the autos have made towards EVs, that's going to be a massive contribution. The two biggest sources of carbon in our economy is power plants and vehicles. And I think you would be happy to know, obviously, that we're going after both of them. And the two are highly interrelated, right? Because if you go to EVs, you got to have clean energy. So we're preparing for that future as a company, and I'm really proud of our auto companies here in Detroit that are also preparing us for that future.
Thank you. Jerry, I know that you have a personal passion for community, especially those that are under-resourced, the low-income communities that have unfortunate circumstances that they're dealing with. How do we make sure that the benefits of the revitalized grid, electric power grid, supports those communities and not just businesses?
Sure. So a couple things that we worked on pretty hard during the pandemic. When the pandemic first descended upon us, our first concern is we got to make sure we keep our people healthy so they keep the lights on and keep the heat going. So that was like job number one. And we spent day and night on all kinds of planning. And we were watching what was happening in Europe and talking to, actually Marco Berzano was talking to the Italian utility because he speaks Italian. And they were getting slaughtered by the pandemic in terms of trying to keep people available to run their operations. And so we learned a lot from that. So that was job one, but then job two was making sure that we could keep the heat on and lights on for our most vulnerable customers that maybe had lost jobs or already didn't have jobs during the pandemic. So that's a personal passion of mine, for sure, and I personally got involved with the chair of the Public Service Commission and the person that was running DHHS at that time, Department of Health and Human Services, and we took a process that used to take 40 to 50 days to get assistance to low-income customers. Took 40 to 50 days down to 2 or 3 days, and made sure that our most vulnerable customers never went without power or went without heat. And so that was a big deal, and that's one of the benefits of COVID is it created massive innovation and streamlining of things in days, not years. That would have taken years to do before.
One of the things that I'd like to mention to everyone is at the beginning of the global pandemic, Jerry Norcia and DTE Energy got together with other community leaders and they did something really phenomenal, not really knowing how needed it was going to be. And what they did is they provided laptops and internet access to every child in the Detroit public school system. And so thank you for that.
Thank you. That was.
As we know, those kids went virtual for many, many months, and but not for you and DTE, that would not have happened.
Well, thank you. It was quite a journey. That was probably one of the, if not the most inspirational journeys I've been on in terms of a project in my entire career. And I'll give the credit to the person that inspired me. It was Reverend Anthony, the head of the NAACP. I was on the phone with him, I think it was a Thursday night at 9 o'clock at night, and I was explaining to him what we were doing for our low-income community, because he cares deeply for the most vulnerable customers that we have. And he says, well, that's great, Jerry, but what else are you going to do? You're in a big job now. He says, you got to do something fundamental here. And I said, I thought I was, and he says, well, I got to tell you something. The governor is about to cancel school here in a week or two in Detroit for the whole state. And these kids in Detroit, only 10% of them have access to an electronic device. I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me, Rev. Is that true? He says, yeah. He says, only about 10% of the kids. He says, you got to do something. I said, yeah, we have to do something. And so I called my friends at Quicken and GM, and they were in like right away. There was not a lot of selling to do. And we raised, between corporate partners and foundations, raised I think about $25 million in about 10 days. And then, of course, we asked our teams to do the impossible, is that by May, we started this in middle of March, end of March, and by May we wanted all the tablets there. Well, we got them there in the summer, but by the time the kids went back to school in September, we had 50,000 tablets in the hands of children so that they could learn remotely and had wireless service for them. So it was quite a job. So thankful for all the partners and just a great journey.
And really changed education for those kids because they were able to still learn, so thank you. I want, please join me in a round of applause for Jerry. Thank you so much.
You.
Well, thank you, Sandy. And we've got a lot of questions that have come in, and I know Jerry and Sandy and some others were in a session earlier with the students, and even the students are sending follow-up questions for you,
wow.
Jerry. They've been
Great.
thinking about
Thank
those questions, and they have follow-up questions for you. But one of the things we did talk about with the students that I think would be great for you to share with this group, and a couple of people have asked this question, is it remotely plausible to bury all the power lines and help negate the possibility of power outages? And you talked about that cost. I think that's pretty impressive.
I did. So let me start that in the 1970s, we started burying all our power lines in new developments, new subdivisions. So about 30% of our system is underground now. And but anything that was built before then is above ground. So I was early on in my, like I mentioned, I grew up in the gas business, but in 2014 I started working in the electric company. And early on I was fortunate to have some tough outages, So I had a meeting with a mayor in one of our communities, And he was really upset because the power quality and reliability in his community was horrible. And so I said to the mayor, I'd really like to trim the trees in your community. He said, well, I want you to bury the whole system. I want you to bury the whole town, 14,000 residents. I said, okay. I said, I'm new to the electric company. I'm going to take this on and come back to you and let you know what it's going to take. So we went and estimated the cost, and came back to him. I said, Mr. Mayor, you're not going to believe the cost, so I'm going to offer right up front that I'll fund an independent study if you want to do it independent of what we've come up with. He says, no, tell me what it is. I said, it's $300 to $500 million for 14,000 customers. And I said, that's quite an assessment that one of us is going to have to, talk to our customers about and your residents about. And but I said, for $250,000, I can get you 95% of the result from a reliability perspective. So he looked at me. He says, well, you look like an honest guy. He says, go trim the trees. I'll help you get it done. And so we did, and we got that result. And think about what that would have taken. Not only is it the expense, but we would have been in those backyards, tearing up those backyards and cutting down the trees that people didn't want down in the first place to get the wires and cables underground, and all the disruption that would have went on for about a decade, to get 14,000 customers' wires buried. Now, we will strategically bury wires, but it is very, very cost prohibitive once it's above ground. When you're building a new sub, you're putting water lines, sewer lines, gas lines, power lines, cable lines, all in the same trench, so it's very economic to do it at that time. But when it's already up in the air, it's pretty tough to do.
And on that note, you've got putting a lot of people back to work by creating jobs. Having all of this tree trimming work and having all of the power line workers. How is DTE getting young people interested in trades and others, getting them back to work?
Well, I'll tell you a pretty unique program that's getting a lot of attention across the country right now is, I always say there's always magic when you got a large community need and a business need and they come together. So the community need was that a lot of young people in Detroit needed employment, and the business need is we need a lot of tree trimmers, right? And tree trimmers is a path to be an overhead lines person, which I know I got the students' attention when I told them that those jobs pay about $150,000 a year. And you get to go to some fun places after big hurricanes too to help out, and so it's a pretty cool job. So what we did is we started a tree trim academy in the city of Detroit, and we did that in partnership with Focus Hope, where we were able to provide wraparound services to get young people in Detroit and Metro Detroit ready to work as a tree trimmer. And the IBEW, which is a great union and really does a nice job in preparing our workers for the job that they need to do, whether it's tree trimming or overhead lines work. And so that gave us the benefit of a new source of workers to do some really important work on our grid, both the tree trimming and eventually lines work. So that's a really unique program. And we're running about 50 students a year through there, but I asked Joe Masalam if we can double that because we're gonna need even more coming out of that class.
Great. We had a couple people ask about generators, especially with the EV industry beginning to take off. People are asking, should we be buying generators in case the power grids cannot handle the surge of electricity?
Well, the plant, generators are usually purchased as a backup to a grid that's not functioning the way it should. So my goal is to make sure you never need a generator. So I'm never going to encourage you to buy a generator unless you absolutely have to, because we really do want to build a grid for the future where generators aren't required. And also generators create a carbon footprint, right? So that's the other downside of a generator. And they make a lot of noise. I don't think you really want one unless you need one.
But do you think Michigan should open up their energy to more competitive bidding to help lower costs, since we have some of the highest rates in the Midwest?
Yeah, that was, there's been a lot of press about that Michigan rates, for industrial customers are higher than, the rest of the country. And average rates is not the way you do transactions. We actually look at what is the type of load that we're trying to serve, and the type of demand that we're looking to serve with these new EV plants is really high load factor. In other words, it runs 24/7, 100% of the time, 365 days of the year. We can compete with anybody with that type of demand on a system. And, the average rate is really irrelevant. Some of the conversation I've been having with our partners where we're trying to do this, I said, nobody sells their cars at the average rate, right? It depends what kind of car or product you're buying. And so we can tailor the product to be as competitive as any other electric company in North America. So we're prepared to compete. We can compete. We've got the tools to compete from our commission as well as from the, there's statutes that govern how we make rates, and it's all there to create economic development. As you can imagine, over the last 100 years, we've helped build lots of assembly plants where we've been very competitive, expansions to those assembly plants, new assembly plants. So we've been competitive in the past, and I'll tell you with certainty that we'll be competitive in the future.
Well, you talked a little bit about wind and solar generated power, but someone asked, will storage be required for wind and solar generated power? And is there technology available for that storage? And if so, can you describe what's being developed?
Sure. So great question, because as you build more and more intermittent resources on the grid, in other words, intermittent means it's not available all the time, like wind and solar. When the wind's not blowing and the sun isn't shining, you need something to back that up. Today, the cleanest technology to do that and most efficient technology is natural gas, okay? There's a lot of conversation about batteries. Batteries are okay, like, for that 1 or 2 hour or 4 hour period. But when the sun isn't shining for days or the wind isn't blowing for days, you need massive resources to back up the wind and the sun when it's not there for you. And today it's natural gas. Now batteries have a place. We're investing in batteries as well, but it's very short duration interruptions that you can deal with batteries. Hydrogen, very promising. It can create a lot of power. It has what they call in our world high energy density. In other words, a lot of power for a small volume that you can generate from hydrogen. If we can produce that from renewable resources, that could be a big deal. That could really change the future and provide the backup and battery that you need, the battery system you need when the wind and the sun is not available. The other one is nuclear, but nuclear is so expensive to build that we have to find unique ways and creative ways to bring the cost down for nuclear expansion. But that's a ways out, and hydrogen is a ways out too. So while hydrogen and nuclear and other sources that we haven't thought about yet are way out there in the future, natural gas just provides a great resource and a battery backup for intermittent resources. It becomes very complementary. We can build a lot more solar and a lot more wind as long as we got gas backing it up as we get out of the coal business.
And someone asked, while it may not directly involve DTE, do you have thoughts on the Line 5 pipeline controversy?
I do. My advice to all parties involved, which I've given to them personally, is you need to figure this out. It's a really important energy source. Like if we shut down Line 5, people in the UP don't get propane this winter. That's tough, right? So there's a lot at stake here. And also that oil line, while we use oil, is really important to our refineries here locally, both in Michigan and Ontario. So I think all parties involved just need to get together and figure it out. I like the solution that Enbridge has, which is to put it in a tunnel underneath the Mackinac Straits. It's a multi-billion-dollar project that they just need to let them get that done so that we take that danger and that risk off the plate for our Great Lakes.
You talked about how you took your exam on a Friday and started on a Monday. And you attended University of Windsor. What brought you to DTE, and what inspired you to go into the energy business?
Well, I just was always fascinated by the energy business, even while I was in university in Windsor. And I started with a gas company in Canada, worked there for 16 years. And then we got purchased by Duke Energy, which is a large energy company in North America, and they wanted me to move to Texas. But I had developed quite a relationship at that time with Steve Ewing, who was the president of Michigan, which is now DTE Gas. And so he got wind of the fact that I might be on my way to Houston. He says, I've heard you really don't want to go. He says, why don't you come work for me? And I came over to start the pipeline business for DTE. And we evolved that eventually into an $8 billion business for DTE. And so Steve Ewing was the person that recruited me to DTE.
And I think one of our students asked this one. They want to know, as a leader of a powerful corporation, what motivates you?
What motivates me is our people. We've just got a fabulous team. When I wake up in the morning and I start interacting with our people, whether it's our people in the field that are doing the work or our people in the offices, I just love working with our people. We just have a fabulous team. And I'm just going to shout out on that is when we measure employee engagement at DTE Energy, and we take that very seriously at DTE Energy, Gallup measures employee engagement across thousands of industrialized companies in the world. We're in the 94th percentile, even after the pandemic. People working from home and not seeing each other, 94th percentile. I mean, it's just incredible energy that DTE people bring to their job each and every day. So that's what gives me energy.
Lots of energy with the energy business. Okay, well, wanted to ask you, each DEC meeting we end on lightning round questions. So wanted to ask you, and these are always fun because even your people that know you best learn something new about you. But what is something that's on your bucket list?
Well, I'm a motorcycle enthusiast. I know my board doesn't like that, but
And you have a couple board members here.
yes, I do. They're here. That's why I want to make sure they got credit for that. So I've got 2 Harleys here in the U.S. That I like to ride, and I've got a Moto Guzzi that I parked at my grandfather's house in Italy.
Block your ears, Chip and Jim.
So my bucket list is I'd love to ride across North America, South America, and Europe. That's on my bucket list. After I leave DTE.
With a helmet on. What person, other than a family member, would you like to have lunch with?
He's dead now, but Winston Churchill. I mean, I just think he was an amazing leader during a very difficult time. I just loved his courage, his persistence, and his grit.
What is one of your favorite movies?
I think similar. Braveheart is probably one of my favorite movies because, again, it was about leaders that lead from the front and that have heart, and they were an underdog.
Great movie, one of my favorites too. What is your favorite vacation spot?
Italy.
No surprise there. And are you fluent in Italian?
I am.
Yeah.
Say something.
Sandy, buongiorno, come stai?
Well, that sounds
That
nice.
sounds.
I hope it was nice.
He asked how you were.
Oh, great.
Describe Detroit in one word.
Gritty,
I love it. I think
in a good way.
Yeah. And what is your advice to your 25-year-old self?
I would say work hard, have integrity, and take risks with your career. I mean, when you're young, take those risks you need to take, and do jobs nobody else wants to do.
All right. Well, thank you. I will turn it back over to Steve, but appreciate you going through the audience questions. Thank you all for your questions. We had a lot in here, so appreciate them all. Thanks.
Nice job, Angie. Thank you. And Jerry, you are always welcome back here to the DEC. Thank you so much for your time. One more round of applause for Jerry Norcia. Sandy and Angie, rock stars in your roles. Thank you, and thanks for your support of the DEC as well. And ladies and gentlemen, we hope to see you on November 29th when we host Secretary Raimondo. Until then, have a terrific turkey holiday. On time, every time. This meeting of the Detroit Economic Club is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.